Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Personal Responsibility Lawyer Podcast. I am your host, Michael Lovins. I'm one of the founding partners of the law firm Lovins Trosclair, which sponsors this program. Lovins Trosclair is a personal injury firm dedicated to helping people who've been harmed by the irresponsible acts of other people and businesses. If you or someone you love has been injured on the job or in a motor vehicle wreck, please call us as soon as possible. Our phone number is 512-535-1649. And you can also find us on the web at www.ltlegalteam.com. That's L as in Lovins, T as in Trosclair, legalteam.com. My guest on today's program is David Hoey. David's the president of the Hoey Law Firm and one of the preeminent trial lawyers in the Boston area, where he focuses on cases that involve abuse and neglect in nursing homes and assisted living facilities and other injuries to the elderly. David is the dean of the Keenan Trial Institute, and he spends a lot of his time teaching other lawyers how to be effective advocates. He's dedicated his career to improving the quality of care and the quality of life in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. The slogan of David's law firm is simple, but it encompasses a whole lot more than just suing nursing homes. His slogan is protecting the dignity of our elders. David, thank you so much for agreeing to take time out of your incredibly busy schedule to sit down and talk with me about some of the stuff that you've got going on. I know you're getting ready for trial. You are a very, very busy man and a very successful lawyer, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me today.
No, I appreciate you doing this, and it's important, and that's why I do it. You know, my message is out there is about being an advocate for people, both on both sides of the fence. You know, pro people who get injured, obviously, because of poor medical care, but also I'm pro nurses and pro doctors, because I want them to provide good quality care, and it just helps all of us.
So tell us real quick, if you would, just kind of a general overview of what your practice is mostly focused on.
Sure. For over 20 years, my practice is concentrated in representing victims of nursing home abuse and neglect, maltreatment of the elderly. And I've been doing that for that long because my mother ran a nursing home for almost 35 years. And so I was exposed to elderly people at a young age. And I always have this saying, I learned more about World War II and the Great Depression and the 1960s from those that lived it than I did from any history book or movie. So I grew fond of good quality health care at a young age and of the elderly at a young age. And when I became a lawyer in the early 90s, I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find a way to protect elderly from nursing home abuse, maltreatment of the elderly, injuries to the elderly. Now, the elderly age has moved now. I mean, my parents are now part of that baby boomers and are considered elderly. Anybody over age 65 is now considered elderly by terminology. But
what was that age when you were a kid?
It was 75 or older.
Okay, so it's actually has gotten younger.
Yeah. You know, there's also the old saying that, 70 is the new 60, and 60 is the new 50, and 50 is the new 40, and that kind of thing. But for some people, that's probably true. But at some point in life, either yourself or your family member or a good close friend is going to need some type of nursing home skilled care or home health care or hospice care or hospital stay. It's just inevitable. It's gonna be there.
Right.
So my fight is to be an advocate, an educator, and I happen to do it through litigation.
So before we actually hit the record button here, we were talking about a case that you're working on that, well, I'll just leave it to you. Why don't tell us the story of this case that we talked about?
Oh, sure. We have many, many different types of cases, but one of the type of cases that we're working on is a 69-year-old woman who has a brain injury and is on pain medication, Percocets mostly.
And I don't mean to interrupt. Are these the narcotic type medicine that when we hear about the opioid crisis, are these the type of drugs that they're dealing with?
Oh yeah, and they got a high price on the street, and they're very addictive, and they're very hard to come off of. Need physician involvement to wean someone off of these type of pain medications. And this woman was on this type of pain medication, and in a group home setting. And for 3.5 years, it turns out that the nurses that were providing her pain medications were stealing the pain medications.
For 3.5 years.
For 3.5 years, they were stealing her pain medications. And the physicians that would have to assess her on her visits didn't realize, were under the assumption she was getting her pain medications and couldn't understand why she was continuously still having pain, and diagnosed her with chronic pain syndrome. And felt that, and they kept increasing her dosage to try to cover up and mask the pain when she wasn't actually getting the pain medications. So it was a on-call doctor who figured it out one day that it was impossible for the amount of pain medication that she was receiving to still experience pain. And that's when they started to figure it out that she wasn't getting her pain medications. So we had brought the lawsuit against the 2 nurses that were stealing the pain medication and the group home owners and operators on behalf of our client.
So, why? Any idea? You may not know yet, and maybe you never will know. Why did it take the doctors so long to figure out that it just wasn't really physically possible for her to be taking the medication and having absolutely no relief or whatever her symptoms remain?
Well, a couple reasons. One is when the doctors do visit our client, they visit her at their office and not at the group home setting.
So the elderly person is taken to the doctor's office.
That's right.
Okay.
With documentation, and the documentation supports that she received all of her pain medication. Mm-hmm. So they're under that assumption that she's receiving her pain medications. The other reason is that she can't communicate for herself.
Okay. So is that due to the brain injury that you mentioned?
Yeah. So she can't express to them that she's not getting her meds. And it took a young doctor going a little bit deeper into our client's story to figure out something's not right here. Let me look into it a little bit further. Notified the group home. Group home looked into it a little bit further, and then lo and behold, someone cracked.
One of the nurses or somebody who knew cracked and said, "Yeah, okay, we've been stealing it." Yeah. How did this elderly lady? How did she express, or how did people know that she was still in pain?
Moaning, grimacing, pointing. It was mostly back, lower back, and shoulder pains. I think, if I can remember, it's from a previous fall or auto accident earlier in her life. And her visitors, her daughter and her granddaughter would come and complain.
Right.
My mom's in pain. My grandma's in pain. I can tell. I mean, she's crying. She's weeping. She's moaning. She's screaming. All those signs that something's wrong with somebody. Like, think of a little baby, right? A little baby will cry for 3 reasons. They're tired, they're hungry, or they're in pain.
Right.
And you do one of the process of elimination, you figure out which one it is.
When you can't communicate verbally, we still have ways of figuring out that a person has one of these needs.
And you can do pain tests, prick tests, squeeze tests, and watch the facial expression of somebody.
Right. Yeah. The thing that just boggles my mind on this is that's 3.5 years of this poor lady sitting there, laying there with absolutely no relief.
Thousands of pills. And this is another interesting thing. Vitamin C tablet looks just like a Percocet tablet.
Is that what they were doing?
At times, they would swap out perks for vitamin C tablets.
So were they just selling these on the street? Were they using them themselves, or do we even know yet?
I think it's a combination of both, or they were giving them to household members. So when they got caught, they were criminally prosecuted. Okay. And it took 2 years before the criminal proceedings were over. They both lost their licenses, whatever licenses they had, and they pled. They took a plea, which means they pled to sufficient facts that if those facts were presented to a jury, they would be found guilty of a crime of theft of a controlled narcotic pain medications. Currently, one of them is attending bar somewhere, and the other one is not employed. And we have taken the deposition of one, and we are asking the court for a bench warrant for the other one.
So I'm sure a lot of the folks listening have somebody close to them who either needs or at some point is going to need some sort of assisted living, nursing home facility, something like that.
Group home health care, hospice setting. Oh, for sure.
How does someone who doesn't, you do a deep dive into this stuff every day with your work. I don't know anything about it, and most of us don't. I guess a couple things. One, how can the facility, okay, so they've got some people working there, they've got a lot of people working there probably. How are they supposed to know that someone's just stealing their the patient's meds? How can they stop this?
It's an epidemic right now. It's prevalent in the industry right now. And the owners and operators of nursing homes, hospitals, nurse placement agencies, all sorts of healthcare settings know that it's prevalent. So knowing that it's prevalent, you now need to put safety blocks in place. Okay. Part of that is policies and procedures. Part of that is training. Part of that is supervision. Video cameras, where they can be used, should be used, particularly in the medication locker. These facilities have the medications. They're supposed to be in a locked unit, and only certain people have access to those medications. In this particular case, some of those safety blocks were in place, but they weren't being followed. What was happening is the facility group home owners and operators got lazy, and they trusted their staff enough, and they allowed their staff enough to be self-managers of themselves. And that's not good. That's just poor management. Knowing that this is prevalent, you got to be on top of it. There are some areas in which the profession can be drug tested, like policemen and firemen.
Right.
They can be drug tested, and in some states you can drug test medical providers like doctors or nurses. Airline pilots are drug tested, obviously, for obvious reasons. So that is another angle that can be looked at. But you can't stop all of it. You're not going to be able to control all of it. But it's a known prevalent problem. And knowing that it's a known prevalent problem, you got to put more safety blocks in place.
So they had, like you said, they had a procedure of what they were supposed to do. They just, at some point, they quit doing it.
They quit doing it,
for at least 3.5 years.
For at least 3.5 years, yeah. There's hands-on management,
right,
of nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and group homes, and there's the absent management that the CEOs, CFOs, directors of nursing, executive directors, administrators of these companies just sit in their office and push paper.
Right.
My mother was the old-fashioned hands-on. Mm-hmm. She still made rounds. She still had a bedside manner. We don't see that much anymore. We just don't. So need to go back to it.
Right.
You need to go back to it. You got to work. You got to know what your staff morale is. You got to keep an eye on turnover rate at these facilities. Why are people leaving? What do they like about their job? What do they not like about management? These are all sorts of little things going on behind the background that the general public doesn't know what's going on.
So if I need to find a facility, any of these, I know there's different types of facilities, different levels of care, and so forth. How do I at least do the best that I can to make sure that the one that I select for the person that I care about is, I at least make it the best chance that they're going to get high quality care, not be neglected, not be abused, all of those sorts of things that normal people want?
It's harder than you think, because most of the time you don't know you're going to need a nursing home setting or a group home setting or sometimes hospice, or going to have to spend 2 weeks in a rehabilitation ward of a hospital. It comes upon you. It's something that you can't really pre-plan.
Right.
And then most people rely on the caregivers, primary care physician or a social worker who's working at a hospital or another medical facility, finding a placement
Right.
for your loved one. And we say, okay, that's fine. There's an availability at the Country Estates nursing home. That's fine by me. But that's not enough. So when someone's in that situation where you have no choice, but your loved one has to go to a facility, you got to visit it. And you got to talk to some of the residents in there, and you got to talk to some of the caregivers in there. And you can't just visit once. You got to visit a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get a feel for it. What does it smell like? What does it look like? Were you greeted by the receptionist in a friendly manner? Or were you able to just walk right by the receptionist and you didn't even get the word hello?
Yeah.
What's the acuity level of the people in the building, which means how sick are they, right? And what's the turnover rate of staff? There's 1,000 questions you can ask. But just like you were going to buy a home,
mm-hmm.
you would go and visit it on its open house or with a broker. And if you like the home, then you're going to get it inspected by a home inspection, right? And if all that passes, you're going to make an offer on the house and maybe buy it. Well, now you're putting a loved one in a facility. But before I go too far down that road,
mm-hmm.
let me give you the distinction between nursing home and assisted living.
Okay.
Right? They are two different animals. Nursing homes provide skilled care, skilled nursing care. Assisted living facilities do not. They're exactly that. They assist in living, your activities of daily living, washing, grooming, eating, walking.
Not medical care.
Not medical care. If you want medical care, that's something on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And the core difference between the two is in a nursing home setting, that can be paid for by some long-term care insurance, whatever your health insurance is, Medicare or Medicaid reimbursement. Okay, not so in assisted living.
Okay.
Assisted living's private pay. It's out of your pocket. And when you run out of money, then you may be going somewhere else.
To a facility.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of great assisted living facilities. You get your own apartment. You get your own kitchen if you want it. They have a gymnasium, a pool, a dining room, private and non-private, all sorts of activities. They'll take you to the country fair for the day. It's like a giant hotel for the elderly.
Mm-hmm.
But your expectations have to be right.
Yeah.
They're not going there for medical care.
Right.
They are going there for some levels of supervision, though. And certain assisted living facilities have units for memory impaired, Alzheimer's and dementia. And there is more of a heightened standard
right.
of safety because these people are suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia. But your listeners need to know there is distinction between the two.
Right.
And they are not the same. And doctors need to know that too. And doctors in the community don't know the difference.
Wow.
They don't know
That's
the difference.
crazy.
It is. They don't. They're learning it.
Yeah.
They're learning it, but they don't know the difference yet.
So, back real quickly to the case where they were stealing this lady's medicine. Just as a human, I hear that story and I say, well, that's horrible. How does what you are doing in helping these folks, how does that affect anyone besides the lady who her meds were stolen and her family that you're, I'm sure, working with?
Well, you're doing it right now by getting the story out. Okay, educate. You got to educate the public. You also have to educate the caregivers. Those that own and operate these facilities need. It's the old thinking of you get in your car and you don't put your seatbelt on because you say, well, I'm not going to get in an accident.
Yeah.
I'm not going to I don't need to put my seatbelt on.
Not going to happen to me.
Not going to happen to me. And many of the caregiving companies are the same way. Well, that happened over there. That's not going to happen to me. Well, through my litigation, I'm telling them it can happen to you, but it doesn't have to happen to you if you take these easy protective safety blocks. That's it. So I educate the public and caregivers.
Right.
I have to be an advocate for both sides. Right now in my state, the nurses, we have vote on question 1, which is to increase the number of nurses in hospitals and nursing homes for safer patient care. Right?
Wow.
I'm in favor of that.
Makes sense.
Right? Yeah. If you have less nurses, am I going to have more cases to work on? Probably, but that's not my goal. Right? So, yeah, bring in more nurses. We'll have safer patient care.
Yeah.
Is it going to cost a little bit more money? Yeah. But that's the price of safety.
Good things cost more than not good
that's
things.
That's what it is. And so these companies that run nursing homes and run group homes and even assisted living facilities, and this lesson to be learned is the stealing of medications by staff members can be prevented.
So when you're litigating one of these cases, and I took some time browsing through your website, hoeylaw.com, HOEY law.com, for anyone who hopefully doesn't but might need your services. You have a lot of verdicts and settlements, and a lot of your verdicts, they're broken down into compensatory damages and punitive damages.
Yes.
Now, compensatory, we know most people understand it's to compensate for something, and some of that's easy to figure out, medical expenses and so forth. And then there's the pain and suffering and mental anguish that it's not as simple to put a dollar figure on that. And then I saw there's at least one case that you had, I think it was a 9-figure punitive damages. I think it was, I've got it.
About $12 million?
I saw one as
14.
$310 million, I think. May not have been a nursing home case. Actually, you know what? I have notes. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one down in Texas a few years back. But regardless of the specific numbers, why do you try to get punitive damages? Punitive, of course, for those who don't deal in the law, that just means that's to punish the people who did this.
But it also has a second purpose. Okay, punitive damages is punishment damages. That's true. And if someone killed somebody, or called wrongful death, right, they're going to be punished for that. The other part of punitive damages is it's the message. Punitive damages, if a jury renders a punitive damages verdict against, in that case, a nursing home, that message goes to all the other providers. Watch out, this could be you if you're going to do this kind of bad acts. So the law allows the jury to know that their verdict is to deter others similarly situated from the same kind of conduct that happened in that case. And that's one of the reasons why punitive damages is allowed under the law in most states.
Right. So we need to probably wrap this up pretty soon. You've been very generous with your time. One last thing, probably the last thing anyone wants is to be your client. The next to last thing they want is to be the one getting sued by you. What would you tell someone who's running a facility like this, whether it's a nursing home or an assisted living or any of those sorts of things? What would you tell them to make sure that they don't get in your crosshairs?
Yeah. It's funny you asked that question. Years ago, there was a company that I sued often. And they would come to me and shake their head and say, not again. And I'd say, look, stop operating the way you're operating and you won't see me again.
Yeah.
Well, they invited me to dinner. And we sat down and we had a nice long 2-hour dinner. And since then, they fixed their ways and I have not sued them again. And that's been 10 years now. So I'm not saying all of you come out and invite me to dinner. But what I'm saying is you can learn from my cases.
Right.
So each one of my case, I will allege something specific about the care provider that they didn't do that they should have done. All right? Just learn from it. Take it, apply it to your business model so that it doesn't happen. There are little fixes. It might be a policy. It might be adding one more staff member to 100 residents. It may be the way you hold yourself out and market for residents. It may be the way you bill for the services you provide. Take each one of my cases, and there's plenty, take the lesson from it and apply it to your business model, and you will not see me, period.
That, as a trial lawyer, that has to be one of the most gratifying things, that you sued somebody multiple times. They were giving very bad care in various ways, and what you did played a huge role, if not the role, in making their patients safer, happier, better cared for. That's got to feel great.
I have not sued them in over 10 years. And every time I see their lawyer in court, we're now friends instead of enemies. Look, remember where I came from. I came from a care setting.
Right.
My mother dedicated her time to elderly people in a nursing home and ran a good, clean, safe ship that never been sued. And so that's where my roots are. It just so happens that I'm on this side of it where I'm protecting people.
Right.
Because I've seen what good care can do. So that's what I said. Advocacy, education through litigation. It's the only way I know how to do it.
Thank you so much for taking the time today. If, God forbid, the last thing any of our listeners want is to need to pick up the phone and call you. But if they do need to do that, how can they do that?
It's easy. It's toll-free. It's easy to remember. Elderly person gave it to me. It's 877-LAW-HOEY, LAWHOEY.
Fantastic. Thank you again, and good luck on all you're doing for protecting our elderly folks.
No, I appreciate it. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. This episode of the Personal Responsibility Lawyer Podcast is brought to you by my law firm, Levins Trosclair, where we use the civil justice system to hold people responsible for irresponsible choices when those irresponsible choices cause serious injuries and sometimes even death. We are personal injury trial lawyers, but we approach our cases a little differently than a lot of other lawyers who do the same basic kind of work. I really, really hope that you do not need us, but if you do need us, please call us before evidence gets lost. You can call us at 512-535-1649. Tell us you heard about us on the Personal Responsibility Lawyer Podcast. You can also go to our website on the interwebs at www.ltlegalteam.com. That's L as in Levins, T as in Trosclair, legalteam.com. We are here to help. Thank you for listening to the Personal Responsibility Lawyer Podcast. If you like what you've heard or if you've learned something interesting, please do me a favor and rate the show on iTunes. It really does help. You can get more information about this show, including the show notes, at my personal website, michaellovins.com. And now I have to do some disclaimers where I say stuff that you already knew, but I got to say it anyway so that I keep the state bar happy. This podcast is not legal advice. You listening to this podcast does not make me your lawyer or you my client. Neither does it make any of my guests your lawyer. If you want me to be your lawyer, contact my office. If I can represent you, we will execute a written contract stating the specific terms under which I agree to represent you. Did you really need me to tell you that? I really hope not. Also, I am not certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization as a personal responsibility lawyer because they don't know what that is. They also have not certified me in any other areas of specialty that they actually do recognize. I think that does it for disclaimers. For Lovins Trosclair and the Personal Responsibility Lawyer Podcast, I am Michael Lovins. We'll see you next time.